Hey everyone, so today's Sunday and I'm back in the countryside for the weekend. Beautiful views. I always feel at home in the English countryside. Whilst I was sat here, I was just enjoying the view. The sun was setting, it was nice and sunny, and then it started raining. This is going to sound weirdly philosophical and probably too deep for a Sunday evening, but I realised that life is kind of like the weather. And I'm going to sort of explain what this means. This isn't a get clients video, it's not a shiny object, it's just me talking to a camera because for some reason that keeps me sane. So there's a consensus that is underwritten by people like Jordan Peterson that life is suffering.
Pick up your damn suffering and bear it.
And if you read Nietzsche or any of these great thinkers from the 20th century or even nowadays, a lot of people seem to agree on this idea that life is suffering. If that's true, then you need to learn how to suffer well. And this brings me back to the raining thing. So I was sat here, nice and sunny, enjoying the sunset. The sun's gone down now. And then it started raining and I was like, do you know what? That kind of is what life is. You're enjoying something and then suddenly something happens to you that might not be pleasant or enjoyable and you don't know how long it's going to last. Now, this is obviously, I'm not saying that being in the rain tantamounts to, the human condition or suffering. But it made me realize that shit's going to happen in your life that isn't pleasant, and things are going to happen to you that you don't want to endure and that aren't fun. And obviously the rain is a pretty weak metaphor for this, but you might be working yourself through something right now. Maybe something's happening in your life that isn't pleasant or that you're suffering through and it's not enjoyable and you're having a pretty shitty time. But the beautiful thing about life, in my opinion, is that we're human beings, which means that we're part of nature. We are nature's product, and anyone who understands nature to any degree will know that the whole world works in seasons. So nature works in seasons, which means that things come and they go and they tend to repeat themselves. And I think the human condition resembles this quite well, where we go through periods of our life where things are going good, and then we go through periods of our life where things are going bad. If you want to understand how to do life properly, my perspective on it is to accept the fact that life is suffering and to learn how to suffer well. And more importantly, to understand that when bad things happen and hard times elapse and you have to sit through pain and discomfort and circumstances that aren't particularly conducive to happiness or fulfillment, that there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. When I look back, when I look back, I'm 25 years old, so I haven't lived much of a life. When I look back on my short quarter of a century around this planet, and really you're not, I wouldn't even say you're properly conscious till you're 15 years old. But when I reflect on the last decade of my life, I've realized that the biggest lessons and the biggest amount of growth has come after a period of suffering. When I think that through and when I actually analyze it, it makes me realize how it kind of is the point of life, to endure things and to suffer through things, but to survive and to plow on towards a goal or a trajectory that you put yourself on in spite of the suffering. If something bad happens to you, it will pass. And this is what I was thinking, right? If you look up here, look at the sky, there's probably a rain cloud coming in just a second, which is quite ironic. But you don't know how long it's going to rain for. You don't know how long the pain's going to last, but it will pass because the wind will blow the cloud over. So when you're going through a shitty time in your life, you don't know if it's going to last a day. You don't know if the solution's going to come to you in a week. You don't know if it's going to take a month, maybe it will take a decade. But the point is that it will pass, and that after it passes, you'll have learned something about yourself or learned something about life that allows you to become a more well-rounded individual, versed in the art of living. For that reason, I think when bad things happen to you, it's easy to lose perspective of gratitude. But when I look back at all the things I've been through and all the suffering that I've enjoyed, either through my personal life or through my business, there's this hindsight of gratitude that I think is quite healthy and quite usual to experience. Maybe you've been through a tough time in your life and perhaps you've had something traumatic happen or something awful that you can't muster gratitude for, or maybe you never will. But what has happened to you is shaping the person you are today. And if you're not particularly happy with your circumstances now, it's easy to look on those things and think, oh God, that's awful. Now, I haven't had anything wildly traumatic happen to me. I've had some shit, but I've fortunately enough, my family has all been kept intact. Everyone's healthy. And, I haven't lost a loved one. I haven't, my life, I've never been in critical danger, touch wood, right? But the things that I thought were so awful at the time, when I was going through periods of uncertainty with my life and my business, that typical sort of quarter life crisis that most people go through in their 20s, it shapes you and it will pass and it will go and it will leave. And if you have the gall to sit through it and endure it with the knowledge that it will pass, there's a lot of wisdom in that. And there's a lot of strength and moral guidance in being able to withstand difficult things. And so if you want to know how to live a good life, you have to learn how to suffer. Because most humans, when we go through bad times, we lose perspective on things that are good in our lives. For example, if I look back on a period of my life which was really dark, so if I take, for example, my first year in business, right, it was a bit of a shit show. I was terrified. I was just stressed to the max. I was only like 18, so didn't have much emotional management in place. But at that time in my life, I thought that it was the worst place in the world to be. I was, for some reason, able to keep going. But at the same time, thinking about it now, I didn't have this perspective. I do now, but what I wish I knew was that there are things in my life that, in spite of this big problem and all this suffering, there are things in my life that I should be grateful for and that I should be happy to have. And so I think that the easiest way to offset suffering, now you can't offset suffering because it's always going to exist. You can't get rid of it. Some people try through drink, through drugs, through antidepressants, hedonism, or people need to do what they need to do to get through it, and that's fine. But I think the ultimate and the purest thing that you're never going to exhaust, and that isn't bad for you, right? Because you might be suffering now and you might be drinking your way through that. But the problem with drinking or drinking or doing drugs or something is the problem doesn't go away. You just delay the feeling of the problem, and so you end up just drinking yourself to an early grave. And the thing that I find is the purest, limitless source of strength through difficult times is gratitude. And it's being able to muster up gratitude for things that you have or things that you have had in your life that allow you to feel some sort of positive emotion or give you a sense of meaning, fulfillment, happiness, joy, elation, whatever, adjective you want to use to describe a good experience. And there's people in my life right now who are going through negative times and periods of things that aren't good for them. And from a sideline perspective, it's not nice to see, but I know that the cloud will pass, and it will mold them into a different person, and they'll become someone else, and hopefully they can grow from it and learn from it. So a lot of this has come from reading Epictetus and Socrates and Seneca. Those dudes really got it. The whole learn how to suffer, because you're going to have to anyway. And my biggest takeaway from my 10 years of suffering in business and life and everything is gratitude. Because what else do you have? How else do you offset suffering? You might be going through an awful period in your life right now, but you've still got your legs. If you don't have your legs, you can still see. If you can't see, you can still hear. If you have none of those things, maybe you've got someone to look out for you. Maybe you've got a pet that loves you. Maybe you've got something to take care of. Maybe there's something if you look as hard as you can, you will always be able to find something that you are grateful for. And I think that for me now, and this is what I was just reflecting on before I recorded this video, the thing that you can hack this, right? You can invert this, and you can become grateful for the suffering. Now, I don't know if this works for everyone. I'm only talking from my personal experiences, but when I'm going through a tough time now, I'm able to source gratitude from the source, right? And what I mean by that is I'm able to take the situation and the thing that isn't enjoyable, and I'm able to foster a feeling of happiness towards it because I know that it will teach me something. And I know that it's kind of the point of life to suffer. And I know that this is what we were put on the planet to do. Now, whether you believe in God or something else is entirely up to you. That's your prerogative. But I've become more spiritually in touch with a higher power, for lack of better words, on this sort of soul-searching mission to figure out what the hell I do with my life now that I've achieved success by the standard societal metric of wealth and financial gain. And the thing that I've been dealing with recently is a sense of directionlessness, right? Now, fortunately enough, I'm on the cusp of solving it, and I've now got new goals, someone to become, etc., etc. But there's another thing you can use to offset suffering, which is also just as limitless, in my opinion, and just as fundamental as gratitude, and that is trajectory. Because if you're suffering through something, if you have a reason to survive it and a reason to learn from it, which basically is a goal, then dealing with it becomes significantly easier. Because now I've looked at the last 3 months of my life, which haven't been particularly pleasant, to be completely honest with you. I know I put on a smiley front on YouTube, and maybe this is wrong of me to say because I'm achieving things that most people want to achieve. But the last 3 months haven't been that fun for me. I sacrificed my health, my relationships, my friendships, my body, my mind to build my last product for my business. So everything went out the window for my company for about basically the last year. And I'm in the state now of dealing with the second, third, fourth order consequences of that sacrifice, which is I'm at a routine, my health isn't that great, my mental health has taken a bit of a hit, but you know, throughout all of that suffering and all that difficulty, I'm able to recalibrate myself. And now that I've done this over the last weekend, basically, now that I've recalibrated myself towards a goal, I'm now able to suffer properly again. Because suffering is significantly worse when it feels pointless. You know, when you're just suffering because you're suffering. Whereas I look at the last 3 months of my life, and by no means is it traumatic, like not knowing what you want to do and stuff, or not knowing what's next or what you truly want. But it's not pleasant, especially if you're conscientious and you have an inbuilt native latent desire to channel and drive conscientiousness towards something you want. Without that, I go fucking insane, which is basically, I haven't gone insane, but you know, we use hyperbole to make points in this day and age. But I've gone a little bit, you know, it's made me feeling really uncomfortable and really, you know, not very nice. But now that I've got something to do, and I've got some new goals, I can look back at the last 3 months and say, do you know what? That was actually a good thing, because without that urgent, unpleasant emotion, I would have not figured out what I want to do next, right? And so I'm sure this doesn't necessarily apply in every circumstance. This is just a personal experience and something that's happened to me recently. But I wanted to share this with you because if you're going through some shit, and if you're going through a really tough time in your life, it helps to have those two things as tools, so gratitude and trajectory. Because he's like Nietzsche said, he who has a why can bear almost any how. And so I have, you know, my next identity and the next goals and the things I want to achieve. And I think that for a lot of people in their early 20s, their late teens, that sort of early part in their life, the most common question that people dread is, oh, what do you want to do with your life? And the answer is, oh, I don't know what I want. And those people suffer. And those people find life extremely difficult and uncomfortable, because ultimately, if you don't have a goal, or if you don't know what you want, then you can't, like, you're just drifting through life with a sense of aimlessness, purposelessness, directionlessness, and ultimately it's very unpleasant. And so I just wanted to let you know that it's possible to find gratitude when you're in your darkest days, and it's also possible to use trajectory and to look for a brighter, more pleasant future, and to use the experiences you're currently enduring as a catapult for you to gain energy, clarity, and lessons to achieve something you want to achieve. And I'm fully aware of the fact that even though the cloud has passed for me over these last few months, the cloud has now passed and I'm recalibrated. And I'm fully aware that in a year, maybe even tomorrow, maybe even a week, maybe even a month, maybe 10 years from now, something will happen in my life that will make me suffer, and that will bring me to my knees and, you know, make me sad, and you know, but that's life, and that's always going to happen. But having reflected on the bad stuff for me over the last 10 years, or you know, however long it's been, I'm starting to come to terms with the fact that A, it's inescapable, but B, there are tools you can use to make it worthwhile. And so I don't know who needs to hear this. I don't know if it's a 15-minute ramble. Fucking hell, was that 15 minutes has passed? But this is something that I've been wrestling with, and it's something that has been on my mind for quite a while, so I wanted to share it with you. So next time you're going through something awful, next time you're enduring something really unpleasant, maybe that's now, just remember that there are things in your life that you should be grateful for. It's not things in your life you should be grateful for, because that makes you feel even worse, because you're like, oh, I should be grateful, but I'm miserable, and oh God. That's something that happened to me, right, where I was going through this last 3 months of like aimlessness and like feeling all anxious and like nervous and scared, basically, for lack of better words, I'll be honest with you. And then, you know, you talk to people and they say, oh, well, how the hell can you feel like that, because you've already got all these things? You've already got all the stuff that people want at your age, so how can you possibly feel, you know, sad or lonely, or whatever word you want to use? But you can. It's the human condition. It doesn't matter how good things are going for you, there's always going to be a cloud over your head at some point, and that cloud will pass, and then, you know, you get rained on and it's pretty miserable. But anyway, this thought just stemmed from being sat here, and it was a beautiful evening, and then suddenly it started raining, and then 5 minutes later the rain passed, and my coat got wet, and my hair got wet, and I'm quite cold, and my trainers are soaked through, and, you know, I'm sat in the grass and it's pretty soaking wet, but ultimately I'm still here, I'm fine, right? And you know, it's a very overextended metaphor to the human condition, but the principle stays the same. You can endure things, and it's not easy to do that, but it makes it more bearable and possible if you are able to use gratitude and trajectory. For example, there's someone close to me in my life right now who's going through a really hard time, and that person has some career prospects that they're working on, and it's keeping them together. They've been dealt a very hard, difficult hand, but I admire them and I love them because although it's all seemingly going to shit, they have this one thing, they have this career that they're working on that is ultimately like keeping them together. That's what's getting them up in the morning, making them take care of themselves. But without that, if they were just working like a normal, not I don't want to say a normal job, but without that trajectory, without that pathway towards a better future, which is the career. It doesn't have to be a career, it could be it could be a person in your life, it could be anything. But without that, anxiety is way more prevalent. And so that's that. I wanted to share it with you. I hope you find this useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.